C's are happy. Debs are happy. Jan, welcome to Konvo. I realize that myself and Debs are going to have to do another sit down that's going to be short to explain to people, to explain why Konvo changed from the Penuel show, because we've had these sit downs, we've spoken about it, and people still don't get it. But welcome to Konvo. I think this has been long in the making. And I'm glad that it's happening now. Especially because my mind is a bit more settled in the type of conversations that I want to have, yeah. I don't know if you know what your name means. Because people are going to be like, we Punu. Uyani, Yanaman.
Maybe I must change it, you know. In the English world, it's like John or whatever. But I don't even know what it means. Maybe one day I should, you know. There was at some point a trend of people changing their names to...
Of course.
Africanize it.
Yes.
But in order of priorities in my life, that has not been... There's also something about it that...
Please, can you bring either the mic closer to you or you closer to the mic?
I have fun in games because sometimes I'll sit in meetings and they'll be like, this meeting cannot start before Jan gets here.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like,
before Jan gets here?
Yeah. Until I say, no, I am the Jan.
Sure.
So the name and the gray hair also is like a good form of differentiation, identity type thing.
If it was back in the day, I went to visit Durban recently and I was reminded because I was at Oceans Mall.
Yeah.
Mhlanga.
Yeah.
Vivian Reddy and his wife, Sorisha, of course. But reminded of his story. I think it's called Edison Electric. Back in apartheid days, where he built some of his money.
Yeah.
And how they used to call him and be like, we want to speak to your boss.
Yeah.
And he'd lie and say, no, my boss is overseas. Meanwhile, it was his business.
Yeah.
And how this, to what you're saying, white hair, which means respect. This is an elder.
Absolutely.
And it's, we're waiting for a white man to come in.
But as I mean, one of the things I've been liking about the Konvo conversations and some of the Penuel show conversations is some of these things that we take for granted that a lot of people understand, you know, like, because in our head, it's like, it's so obvious, right? So it's fascinating when I come across kids that don't know that you had to be given the so-called Christian name, right? So if you do not have a white name, you were not getting a birth certificate. And either your parents rocked up at Home Affairs with the name. If they did not, you were given the name on the spot, right? And the names also then reflect what was the dominant community of white people in that area.
100%.
So in my part of the world, because it was predominantly Africans farming, the white people were the African farmers. This is why from my part of the world in Limpopo, you have Jan, Fanny, Oma, all of that. Because it was a reflection of it's a reflection of the known names in that part of the world. So I came out with Jan.
And you would have been John. You're very right. It's from John the Baptist, Hebrew, or Dutch in your case. And it means God is gracious.
Wow.
So you don't have to research. I'm right here.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Your surname?
That's another complicated story. It's another complicated story. So my surname is a made-up surname, actually.
Made up?
Yeah. So in the rural parts of say Limpopo, you'll have some random guy who rocks up coming from wherever. Like there's a good chance that this old man came from Zim, right? Great grandfather, right? Okay. And what will happen is at some point the locals will give you a name, right? So this guy then tries to get married, but no one knows who's your family, who's coming to negotiate, whatever. And the family he was trying to marry the girl from, Bahana, they were refusing to let him do that. So people started to call him Moganwa.
Just from that?
Yeah. That's the guy that was trying to get married to this woman and whatever. Ki Moganwa. So that's why my kind of like the history of my family lineage is quite short because we don't know
beyond
where this guy
comes from.
So you can only trace your family lineage, 3 generations?
Yeah.
Hectic.
Yeah.
I maybe I shouldn't raise it today, but I really think that most people should only focus on 3 generations.
Yeah.
The more history I study, number one, the more I realize how related we are.
Yeah.
Number two, I realize how distorted history is.
Yeah.
Some of what we call proud Zulus and proud Amaxhosa and Amashangane and Amandebele, you're like, you guys actually don't know where you come from.
That's
so
insane.
Focusing on 3 generations, your grandparents.
Yeah.
If you're lucky to meet your great-grandparents, maybe make it 4. But grandparents, your parents, and just focus there. Especially because even this thing of surnames is more colonial.
Yeah.
Tina, it would be your name from your father's name. So I'd be Ulungelo Kazwelake.
Yeah.
That would be it. Uzwelake kamsongelo. Like Ushaka kasenza ngakhona, misuzulu kazwelithini.
Yeah.
Now we make it a surname thing, and that's colonial. Because it normally comes from someone's name that was stuck.
Yeah.
And when we had to formalize, then it was like, okay, you'll be Kibine from either a person or a place or something.
Yeah, and this is also why I find all this culture conversations so frustrating, right? Because culture is how things play out at a point in time.
100%.
Right? I mean, I commented on one of the videos by Ernst Roots where he's talking about preservation of Africans' culture. And by part of preserving it is to probably ring fence it somewhere else. I'm like, you can't be serious. The very definition of Africans' culture is what comes out of diversity.
100%.
Like it's like the biggest irony. Like there is, I mean, you've touched on it a number of times. No one got here an Afrikaner.
Yes.
The only reason we can even talk about African culture is actually what comes out of a melting pot of diversity. So you will think a culture that comes from that background will be pro-diversity because without that diversity, they don't even exist. You spoke about, I think in one of your videos, you spoke about even how the language comes about. It was called decomposed dal. It was the kitchen language. And you correctly said it was actually the kitchen workers, which were not white, obviously, who were trying to make sense of the different languages. So they took a bit there. So that's why you will see a lot of French origin, Khoi origin, Xhosa origin in the Afrikaans language. Afrikaners is the celebration of diversity. To come and argue that it must be ring fence is...
It's counterproductive and it's counterintuitive to how
so
you guys got here.
It's
But then, and look, I agree with you guys. You know, I was having a chat.
No, you're agreeing with Jan.
No, but the about the idea of culture and how we need to. Some people want to preserve it, but the fact that you can survive without saying I am this thing, you can still coexist in the world. What I'm gonna throw it at you guys. Then what do you say to people who say, no, my identity and my culture is through the lineage of the man? And people who make shows about it, I don't know my identity, blah, blah, blah. Things are going bad in my life. It's because people are claiming that it's linked to a surname and that surname is linked to a certain way of living, which is a culture. Then what do you guys say to that then?
Preservation of culture is an oxymoron. It's a crazy idea. Culture can't be preserved. Culture is like a river, right? It just reflects the current circumstances of where water is flowing today. This is why we end up saying pap is African, whatever. Like, it's crazy. Pap cannot be an African food because it came on, it came on a sheep. It cannot be. So even things we call, this is my tradition, this is my culture, it's nostalgia. It's the idea that there was a point where life was predictable and it worked this way. Societies have to always evolve, and that's really the piece we need to make. People mix up issues. Sometimes people want to say, okay, but we need to know where we come from. There's nothing wrong with saying I want to know where I come. That's very important. Yeah. But don't start to be all crazy about it. I mean, you touched on something where I did not even know this, that in my part of the world, we've got a sub-tribe, if you like, called Bakoni. I did not know that comes from a subset of the Ngunis that actually ended up in the Limpopo. Like it's insane. Like to your point, if you trace this thing long enough, we are all same.
So at some stage you're gonna end up not knowing who you are.
No, you don't have. You need to know who you are, but that has got nothing to do with something you need to be tied to and obsessed with. There is a different component of it, which is the psychology part of it. Yeah, the psychologists argue that we've got existential angst. Like constantly, you ask yourself, "Why am I here?" Like, you need to find some form of meaning,
Some
right?
purpose in life.
Some purpose in life. So there's an argument by psychologists, we are not rational beings, we are rationalizing beings. So now that you need this thing that says you mean something, then you go back and try to stitch together something that affirms that.
Yes.
Like you want to feel like your lineage means something.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we are all just like average human beings trying to make ends meet. But to work with that understanding is very difficult, because how do you drive hope and meaning and whatever? So we bastardize. Interestingly, whenever people tell the story of their culture, of their background, they are the hero in that story.
Correct.
Isn't that like, that's
not the
fascinating? No. They're the
I'm
hero
gonna
in that
touch
story.
on exactly what he's saying.
They're the hero in that story. You're like, okay. Now I sent something on LinkedIn the other day, and so it dropped off some of the Christians the wrong way. I said, I am continuing to be fascinated about the David and Goliath story. We know very little about Goliath.
Yes.
Very little. Did this guy have a family? What was he doing before this whole encounter? We know everything about David's story. We know he was called, he was a shepherd. But what about this guy?
Goliath.
And I guess someday someone who comes from the lineage of Goliath must write a story to say, guys, let me tell you what went down that day, so.
And how David cheated.
How the guy cheated.
I want to say a few things to try and answer you with Debs. The first thing I'm going to say, Uyan raises this very correctly. And we've had Chaba. Is it Chaba? I think it was Chaba. Here and other people.
No?
Yeah. Maize is not native to Africa. I think some people link it to Mexico. A lot of our fruits, your bananas are not from here.
Yeah.
Your pears, your apples, your plums are not from here. Things like chickens, which black people love, are not from here.
They're not from here.
The mice and the rats we have in Africa actually came off the ships with these guys.
Yeah.
We didn't have mice and rats. Alex.
Yeah.
Horses are not from here. We had some breeds of dogs. We had cattle. We had sheep. We had goats. Pigs are not from here.
Yeah.
But there are so many foodstuffs that are not from here that we now say these are our African cuisine.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I want to raise. The second thing I want to raise is when you get disturbed, we'll use colonialism as an African people because that's the easiest one for all of us to identify with. But a disturbance could be that you were born an orphan. You don't know your parents. Or you were born into poverty. Or you were violated. Or you were in a space where your people were seen as inferior. Your father is a slave or your mom is a domestic worker. So it's from that a lot of people then yearn to figure out, why was I born into being a bastard or a nobody? So then they start searching. And they try to find the story that makes them feel good.
You have to feel,
And look, it is important, especially in a situation where this becomes sensitive when women lie about paternity. Because it's not so much, it's just, you're actually being raised by the wrong family. Doesn't need to be the wrong clan or tribe, but you are being denied the people that are the reason why you run so fast. Why you've got white hair, but you're the only person in your family with white. It doesn't make sense. And then you bump into another family from the village. They all have white hair. You're like, what's going on here? So people yearn to just have those answers, which is the rationalizing
absolutely
of story. As I study a lot of our South African cultural history, to what Tuyan is saying, a big chunk, I would argue the majority, other people would dispute, a big chunk of amaXhosa, amaZulu are not tied to the originators of those so-called nations. So
Absolutely.
Ushaka becomes the king that consolidates through violence,
Yeah.
but his lineage is uZulu kamalandela.
Yeah.
Now, the people he consolidates are not blood linked
No.
to uZulu kamalandela. They come from Omthethwa, they come from Ongobo, they come from Ondwandwe, other families. Yes, you can lead them all back to Ontu, no, Ongoni.
Yeah.
That's fine. But at least at that level, when you go beating your chest, you might find that you are part of the tribes that were defeated
Absolutely.
in battle.
Yeah.
Same with the amaXhosa, where a lot of them linked to Uchawe,
Yeah.
Nkosi Yamtu. You go up, CBC, all the way to Ntu as well, Omalangana. You realize that Uchawe formalizes the Xhosa clan, but later on it would be Uyinza, who would then welcome all these people that are coming into the community.
Yeah.
Who would be Amamfengu,
Yeah.
that would be wandering, Amapakt, Amabele, etc.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It's really fascinating.
But people crave that because they feel we were disturbed.
You need something. You need to feel like your life means something. It's like a human thing, right?
Yeah.
But anyway.
I have a question for you. Sorry. You spoke about Aaron's roots. You spoke about Afrikaners.
Yeah.
Mixed masala of the Huguenot people, the French, the Dutch, predominantly.
Yeah.
They've got some Malay blood in them. They've got some Xhosa blood in them. They've got some Khwe blood in them as well, if they accept it.
Yeah.
You reference your movement Citizens, or you link it very much to AfriForum, of which Aaron's roots used to be one of the leaders.
Yeah.
Then he joined Solidarity, and now he's left Solidarity, and he started, I don't know if it's called the Pioneer Movement.
Yeah,
Pioneer,
like yes.
Why would you contest elections after you've decided that you think AfriForum is a good model that other non-Afrikaans people should be following?
Absolutely. So, first of all, thank you for the time. But I want to start with the riddle, and then we'll come back to the citizens and the movement, like to make sure Depsa is awake. So we have Jessica, and are you also awake?
No, Sizwe is awake.
Sizwe, are you awake? So we just came out of Easter. And of course, the roads were packed. Usually the Limpopo people have to go see Bomma, as they say, because apparently we are so attached to our moms.
What's the Kwena Highway? N3?
The N1.
Is it N1?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, N3 is Durban.
It's N1.
Okay.
So the same thing, this story may or may not be true, but Mashaya also went home somewhere in the rural areas. And while Mashaya was there, I suspect it could have been somewhere in the Eastern Cape, but we do not know. Or KZN. While Mashaya was there, the story is he went to the local shop, right? And after collecting a few items from put in the basket, and he paid with his Apple Watch, right? At this rural place, right? And the story is this guy got a standing ovation.
Yes.
I mean, the cashier said,
Iron Man, Baba.
Like,
Tony Stark.
Yeah, like
that must be mind blowing to see for the first time.
Absolutely.
Guy takes out his watch, we beg Allah,
like
peps, and he moves.
Yeah, beep. And it's like it's done. The sleep prints out.
Sure.
Yeah. But the question of the riddle is Mashaya intelligent? Like from the story, I mean, is he intelligent? And I would like to get views. I mean, Debza, Sizwe, Pan.
Is there a correct answer here?
I don't know.
Do you have a perspective?
I don't. Well, I'll have a view, but it.
You'll share yours at the end.
Yeah.
Sizwe?
Is Mashaya intelligent? Is he a competent guy?
You can
Is an
just nod or
intelligent
shake your
guy?
head because you don't want to talk.
Sizwe won't talk.
The watch, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I can give you an answer on that, because if there's already a speed point there, it means that there's a technology conducive to him paying with the watch. I don't know whether I can tell you whether he's intelligent or not.
Yeah.
You're just saying he happens to have technology that's aligned to what works. So we can't gauge whether he's smart or not. It's just by circumstance that he had the tools that others didn't have.
Yeah.
You can't say because he has the tools, therefore
Yeah.
He's intelligent.
Yeah.
No, I'm asking.
I'm saying I can't make that judgment.
You
Okay.
can't. Yeah.
He comes from another environment. He happens to have a piece of technology others don't have.
Yeah.
In that environment, he might actually be a nobody. There might be guys with other things.
Yeah.
So we can't gauge.
Yeah.
It's relative.
I feel like it is.
Okay.
That's
Thanks,
it.
sis.
Thanks, sis. That's a good view.
Debza,
Aye, man. This is a trick.
Oh, Debza,
Can't
come
do it now.
on.
when you went back home with your Apple Watch, Baba, were you intelligent or not?
No, I don't link it to any intelligence. He just used whatever resources there to pay for something.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything intelligent.
Yeah.
I mean, someone else could have paid with a phone.
Yeah.
Is that intelligent? Someone else
Yeah.
could have paid with a card. Someone else could have done an e-wallet, paid cash. I think they're all the same.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Debza this question, but I want to come back to you, Sizwe. How do you define intelligence? Because that's actually important to this.
Hey, Pen, hey, now you're going too
leave
far.
Caesar alone.
Caesar might just get a mic.
Caesar answered using his own. There's a good reason I didn't even offer the definition.
He mustn't
of it.
answer.
No, he mustn't.
It's your riddle.
He decided. Yeah,
So
he mustn't answer.
answer.
You must answer.
Debza also mustn't answer.
No, Debza must also, because he made his
done.
own assumption.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
So he mustn't
He
answer
must
that question.
also
as well.
Oh, Pen, what do you think, Pen?
Is he intelligent? Yes,
Is he?
I believe so.
Okay.
My understanding of paying with a watch or a phone is that it is a superior technology.
Yeah.
It's an assumption. I
Yeah.
could be wrong.
Yeah.
And with that being said, I think people who gravitate towards a superior technology, if we
Yeah.
assume it is, whether accidental, circumstantial, whatever the case may be, I would assume they're intelligent.
Yeah.
With that being said, there's also other underlying assumptions that he's going back home to the village, as an
Yeah.
example. So he's left the village to go and be in another space where he was exposed.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think he probably has more exposure to things
Yeah.
than the people where he's coming back, which is why the people there would see him as a mini god.
Yeah.
He's the guy bringing a cell phone. He's the guy bringing things that people hadn't seen. So he will be the guy that ends up. We were speaking about surnames and family.
Yeah.
The village is going to be named after him.
Yeah.
After his say, now Apple Watch, Baba,
Absolutely.
who gave birth to people paying
Yeah.
just with their hands.
Yeah.
That's my take without
Yeah,
defining intelligence.
It's like, imagine if in the olden days you have a weather forecast app.
Come on.
Right?
Who-
You will compete with
You are Muchachi.
Muchachi. Because
Yeah.
you can say, guys, don't listen to what anyone says. I'm going to tell you when it's going to rain.
Yeah.
But the answers were all useful, by the way. And I am more in the Sbu and the Debza space. It frustrates me to no end when we use exposure that people has as a measure of their intelligence. We give credit, even, for example, I hear repeated story about how, for example, the people who came to the Cape Colony must have been intelligent and competent and whatever, when all they did was to come with stuff they had exposure to,
Yes.
many of which they did not even manufacture.
Correct.
So the exposure to guns, right, that came actually from China. Gunpowder comes from China. It was in the trade of looking for spices that someone came across gunpowder. The early gunpowder was used for cannons, actually. So cannons came before guns. Because essentially a gun is a small cannon.
It's a mini cannon,
It's
yeah.
a mini cannon, right? But that came from China. But you are exposed to that, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna take it elsewhere where they don't know it, and when I get there, I'm going to declare myself king.
Boom.
That's, I say this to, this is probably a bad joke, but I say this to one of my short friends that, my man, somewhere, my best friend, somewhere in the world, you are a tall hunk. You just have to keep going to a community where there are a lot of short people.
No, he has to search. He needs to travel.
Really bad joke. Really bad joke.
Somewhere in there.
You're very tall.
And it's just interesting how even the fruits and the veggies and whatever, somewhere in the world, those grow in the wild.
Yeah.
But what someone did was to say, hold on, there is another place where this thing does not grow. Chilies, somewhere in South America, actually grow in the wild.
We've got rooibos here.
We got rooibos.
Grows native to South Africa,
Absolutely.
exported around the world.
Absolutely. So I am of the view that, to Zizwe and Debsa's point, exposure is not a sign of yes, it might help you with social it's not a sign of natural aptitude and all of that. But it is interesting how people who came, someone wrote a book and say, if you went to China, you will have very little respect for many retailers in South Africa, because all they did was to go to a place, see how things work, and bring that model here. Yeah, we can say there's different forms of intelligence, social intelligence. Now, the more controversial question, which actually touches on some of the conversation you've had, is Rob Hersov competent? Is he intelligent? Is he competent?
Do you need that to be answered?
Yeah.
Before I answer it, can we do the intelligence definition? Because clearly our definitions are not the same. You said the man's not intelligent. Debza said he couldn't call. He doesn't have enough
No, I
info.
didn't say he's not intelligent.
You said you can't tell. Sorry.
I'm saying that based on what we've been told, we can't make assumptions about the person's intelligence.
You guys don't want to talk now. I can say and then answer.
No, I mean, I'm good. I mean, I've got the mic. I'm fine.
No, I'm saying that your definition of intelligence.
Yeah, what is it?
I think this is important for a lot of us because small things like your grapple of English, your education qualification, how much money you have. So I just wanted to ask in the riddle that was given.
The definition of intelligence.
What is your definition of intelligence? So that if someone says, here's a scenario, and you're like, if I don't see these things, then I cannot
for
conclude.
me, simplest form, outside of the riddle as well, simplest form of defining intelligence is the ability to solve something at a quick and faster pace to progress society.
The ability to solve problems.
Yeah, for me, that is
So a
intelligence.
person who can solve problems is smart. A person who can solve problems faster than others is smarter than others.
Yeah, for me, that's how I define intelligence. The ability to solve an issue. We've got a problem here. There's a fire here. How do we take it out? Or we need to slaughter a cow. Who has to do it? Because people show intelligence in different forms. There's that uncle that is always drunk in the family. Poop, drunk. He's got nothing. Then comes Easter weekend or Christmas. Like, okay, all the boys from Josie, the so-called intelligent ones. Like, okay, it's time to slaughter now. Now he shows intelligence in that
scenario.
In that scenario, for me, he's intelligent in that one aspect. So for me, there's a problem. Who can solve the problem now to progress whatever the issue is we're facing now? So for me, it's solving issues, problems quicker.
Caesar,
Intelligence.
your definition here.
I just think similar to Debza.
Same as Debza.
If you can solve something
Yeah.
in the world that you live in,
Yes.
for me that's intelligence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. I'm gonna try and answer your question. Of course, I'm gonna be giving you my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And we're using a human being's name, a real living person.
Yeah.
My definition of intelligence is very similar to Debza no Sizwe in the sense of people that can solve problems and people that can solve problems fast and people that can solve bigger problems become more smarter than others. In the example that you used, I'd like to think Kumashaya is not the only person from Joburg.
Yeah.
I'd like to think there's a lot of them. But he happens to be the guy that comes with the Apple Watch.
Yeah.
Many Europeans would travel to China and India for spices and silk. Some would be curious to figure out how they power cannons, how they have fireworks, and they would be like, Pinjam, you know, the chicken licken store in South Africa is one of them. George Sombonos would travel to America every year. His father would give him money to travel as a youngster. He would go out of his way to find something to bring back.
Yeah.
Millions of people travel to America every year. They don't come back with anything.
Yeah.
So I have to assume that this guy is different from those that were exposed just like him.
Yeah.
Many white people benefited during apartheid, colonialism. Many are poor today.
Yeah.
Many black people are dealing with the same affirmative action, BEE, but are struggling. So we have to ask as well that in your exposure, what are you picking up and applying?
Yeah.
Which is why I would still give this guy some level of intelligence for his ability to do that.
Yeah.
Whether there was a problem that he solved, whether he was using a tool that was borrowed,
Yeah.
is up for debate. But for
Yeah.
the fact that he could do something that many others, for whatever reason, could not do, I think makes him slightly at an advantage. So I could argue that even the settlers in the Cape, the Portuguese that come here before, many others would come, but Abu van Riebeeck would decide to settle and be like, look, everyone keeps double-upping here, but no one has set up an Ultra City.
Yeah.
No one has set up a Bad style. We want to set that up.
Yeah.
And we're going to speak with the locals and set up and negotiate. And in that, we'll also see if we can learn things from them. Because even our natural intelligence, whether it's herbs, knowing our history, we also learn it from exposure.
Yeah.
And then we get called smart because I went to go and study
Absolutely.
Yeah, so in that context, or no, not with that context, I think I'll park my answer there. Your question was, is Rob Hersov competent?
Is he intelligent? Is he competent?
You use them interchangeably.
No. You can.
Two separate questions.
I would like you to choose whichever one you want to. And after that, I'll tell you why I'm asking.
No problem.
It's tied to the Mashaya story.
No problem.
Not that I'm saying he's Mashaya, but I'm just saying there's a good reason.
Before you hit the story you're speaking about, the Chigilikan story, because I know that story. He goes to, I think, the USA.
Yeah.
Tells the guy, can I buy this spice for $1,000? And the guy's left with 200. He's like, man, okay. Then he gives him like a quarter of the spice. Then he comes back to SA. Then he figures out the whole spice. Same with Koos Becker. He was traveling, I think, to the UK and Australia before, DSTV. Mnet.
Yeah. Because they set up Mnet.
Yeah, because then he realized that, okay, going to 94, there's going to be a lot of middle class people. So this thing of having Ahmad Decoder could be a thing. He also copied it from Australia. I think Australia, UK. He comes back and he then implements this thing. So it's crazy when you speak about that. I was watching a video about in school, they don't allow you to copy.
Yes.
But in the real world, they tell you copy paste.
Copying and getting other people to do your homework in the real world is what actually gives an advantage.
Exactly.
But at school, it's completely frowned upon.
Which doesn't make sense. Because most businesses that are in South Africa, actually anywhere, we copy them from somewhere. Whether it's the Yoko stories from somewhere. So copy pasting in the real world is a big thing.
That's why we argue sometimes that school almost is counter being productive and being successful in the real world. Because almost everything you taught at school is counterintuitive to like being successful.
Yeah.
Which also kind of also explains why successful people are weird in the way they move, because they had to break either rules and laws or their own moral codes to get to their levels of success.
Yeah.
Using Rob Hersov as an example is dangerous for me because I know him personally.
Yeah.
But I will speak of people like him because he's not alone in terms of being born into privilege.
Yeah.
From families that built wealth during colonialism or apartheid, or maybe we can even use BEE as an example. Rob Hersov is, I don't know if I'd use Utopi as an example. Maybe. Or maybe Utopi's child. Because you've got Patrice Motsepe, you've got his father Augustine, who, for whatever reason, you can use whatever reason, BEE, being friends with rich white people, they get some level of advantage.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of now, how do you exploit this? Do you add any value to it that we can actually quantify that Johan Rupert inherited Rembrandt, turned it into Remkro, added Richmond. We can see the value add.
Yes.
So now we'd have to quantify people like Rob, like Utopi, with Sundowns. I don't know if his father involves him in any other businesses. Have you added any value to what your grandfather, your father have done?
Yeah.
Have you taken away?
Yeah.
And to where he is today, from a business perspective, I cannot see it.
Yeah.
Many other people cannot see it. That this guy inherited Anglophile Industries, AVI, which was what the Hersovs inherited when they split Anglophile mining and the industries part.
Yeah.
He's gone on to create a lot of relationships that I don't know if his family had.
Yeah.
Rupert Murdoch being one of them. He also worked for Johan Rupert at some point.
Yeah.
And he created a lot of relationships, I think, in Europe. Maybe in America as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that gets quantified as value add, if those are unique to him
Yeah.
and what he's been able to achieve with those.
Yeah.
Then the thing becomes, is there anything unique that he's brought in?
Yeah.
So he can say, I'm the guy who started a media company for our family.
Yeah.
He's now gone into podcasting.
Yeah.
He's gone into media. I don't know about his grandfather, but compared to his father and his brother,
Yeah.
he's the most visible and most vocal of the Hersovs.
Yeah.
Do we quantify that as a value add?
Yeah.
Do we quantify it as something else?
Yeah.
Has it brought in money into the family? I don't know.
Yeah.
But if we're using his grandfather as the benchmark,
Yeah.
and we're using the claim to fame as
Yeah.
building wealth,
Yeah.
he has not proven that is close to his grandfather
Yeah.
and has exceeded or has added immense financial value
Yeah.
in that perspective. And again, you use him as an example,
Yeah.
but this could apply to many of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like the answer, right? And I'm on the same page, right? This is part of the frustration, one of the reasons I wanted to have these conversations. And he triggered me clearly when he said they cannot be as competent as us, right? And
Sorry, for context, that was when I was sitting with DJ Sbu.
no, he said
his
that
own.
at the Biz News thing.
Yeah, he repeated
and then
it.
you guys also then asked him,
And he
right?
was speaking about black people,
But the
that black people can't be as competent as white people.
as us, right?
Who's our
He
rich
said
white
us.
people?
No, he included, he meant white people, but he included himself in there.
Okay.
Like they can't be as competent as us.
Okay.
But for me, then the most obvious follow-up question is, who declared you competent, right? And to your point, there's something called a halo effect. A person comes on a platform, sounds confident about what they're saying. I'm yet to see a conversation. So every time Rob is introduced, Rob is a successful business person and all of that. This is really one of the reasons why I like Diary of a CEO. Because Stephen always says, tell us a bit about what got you here and why your voice matters, right? It's interesting how I am yet to see a podcast where Rob is being asked to prove his competence. Right? To say, okay, tell us why your voice matters and how you get here.
Yeah.
He is competent because he has declared himself competent, but then people will start to talk about him as if he's competent. You know, so to your point, if someone said, let's talk about, is Johan Rupert competent? I can make a case that says, here's a guy who took this business from his father and he created, to your point, Remgro, early investors in RMB, built out Richmond. He seems like a competent guy on the basis of that.
Yeah.
Rob is taken at his voice. He declares himself competent. Then he must be treated as competent. But after that, he goes on to insult other people as if they are incompetent. And then we repeat this thing. Oh, here's a guy. I mean, it's interesting how they always say, Rob can go live anywhere else. Like I can tell you, if anyone could go live anywhere else, they'll go live there. Anyone who's here, they are not doing South Africans a favor. I hate this narrative that there are people who could go live anywhere in the else, but they are here.
Yeah.
The corporates in South Africa that try to go build elsewhere, they actually realize the world out there is a very hostile place.
They struggle.
You can name them. They will struggle.
struggle.
Pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
Because here, you are a big fish in a small pond. When you get to US, my brother, you are tiny.
Yes.
Here you can insult a president, ask for an interview with the or meeting with the president, and you get it.
Yeah.
But the world out there, and the part of the problem is they have not been able to recreate their success in a small pond, recreate it elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know,
Even on the African continent.
even on the
they
African
struggle.
continent,
Yeah.
right? But they are assumed competent because they said they are competent, and now you feel like you've got the right to insult other people. You know, so really one of the reasons I wanted to come and have this chat is I am worried about their amount of, I call it attention war, not even propaganda war, right? Attention war. So, and much of it now is also being perpetuated. I call it rented blacks, right? So it's not only that there is a big propaganda machine that almost seeks to, reposition history and all of that. That's being done by a particular group, including Aaron's Roots with the Pioneer and all of that. What really irks me is when black people repeat it, right? Black people. So I'm not saying Rob is not competent or intelligent. I'm saying we must ask why we consider him competent.
Yeah.
And there is not enough of that going on, So, and I want to bring some of those elements as we talk about Citizens, which is really what you asked me. I have not forgotten about it.
Sure.
When we started Citizens,
Are you speaking about Citizens now?
Do you want to?
No, I want to touch on what you're saying because it's fundamentally important.
Yeah.
I'm one of the black people that is accused of being a rented black.
Yeah.
By people on social media who don't understand how I move and who I speak to, etc.
Yeah.
We've got a situation currently where the DA is fighting against employment equity.
Yes.
And they're speaking about merit.
Yes.
Over demographic appointments.
Yes.
And people on social media are asking the same DA.
Yeah.
But you guys have got certain leaders that if we look at what you're saying on merit, they would never qualify for some of these positions. So how dare you?
Yeah.
And it fits in with what you're saying because nothing will trigger you more. And I was incredibly upset sitting with Rob and DJ Sbu in that sit down. Many white people in the comments would say I was being disrespectful because I wasn't looking Rob in the eyes, which I've tried to explain in the past. Rob is my elder.
Yeah.
He's old enough to be my dad.
Yeah.
Outside of a direct sit one-on-one like this, we're not raised as Africans to stare at people in the eyes when you speak to them. It's a form of respect for us, but other people interpret it as you being disrespectful. I'm speaking to you, look at me in the eyes.
Yeah.
The second thing is they were saying I was on my phone. I'm normally on my phone to research.
Yeah.
Which I've said here, but anyone who's never watched me is going to come and be like, look, he's busy with his phone. And you're like, you're triggering me and you're gaslighting me because this is how you'd speak to our parents and the people that came before us who are respecting you.
Yeah.
When you're speaking to Moses or Jan or Pen, they keep quiet and it's not because they disrespect, but you guys take them for a fucking puss.
Yeah.
And when we try and address those things, your condescension and your patronizing tones don't end.
Yes.
And you keep saying these things of, we are competent, we are better. Helen Ziller would be like, white people brought civilization here, etc. And yes, many of us will applaud a lot of the things they bring. Mashaya bring an Apple Watch to the village. We'll applaud it. But many others would be like, but the Apple Watch is not even his. He got it from Joburg. But it doesn't belong to Joburg. It's an American product. Yeah. But the Americans also, it's being made in China.
Yeah.
Who actually created the IP? We're not sure. Did Steve Jobs steal it? So mostly it's a collaboration, which you try to sell to people that we are collaborating.
Yeah.
You came up with an idea maybe of a stadium because you saw it. You saw the Colosseum in Rome.
Yeah.
And then you came here and you saw that we're hardworking and you said, let's build. Tomorrow you're saying, I built stadiums.
Yeah.
Bow down to me.
Yeah.
And it's worse when you actually never built a stadium. Your great-great-grandfather built a stadium, copying the idea from somewhere, using exploited labor of our forefathers. And now you're beating your chest over that. And you're trying to be understanding that, hey, shout out to your grandfather, what.
Yeah.
But can we work? And then you say, the problem is you can't compete with.
Yeah.
And you're like,
can't compete with us.
So
like,
I was incredibly upset at that sit down, but it had been even before that on some of the platforms, or Rob specifically had been on, where I realized that some of the people we are trying to engage, in particular white people, they are not listening.
Yeah.
They don't want to listen.
Yeah.
They don't want to understand.
Yeah.
And Debza and I are huge fanatics of movies. We spoke about culture and how we focus on the David story, the hero. We don't focus on the villain story, Goliath.
Yeah.
We'll speak about the Joker in Dark Knight. We'll speak about Thanos in the Avengers.
Yeah.
Killmonger, Ryan Coogler, shout out to them. They just released Sinners now with Michael B. Jordan. There's a story there in how a villain was created.
Yeah.
And how Ibrahim Traore as a young guy comes up. How the Kim family, Kim Jong-un is third generation now. He can be compared to Rob Hersov. People create villains. cancel culture, swearing at us on social media, calling us blacks for hire, or Penuel just suck up to whites and they batanda mabunu. And at some point, the one side, the black people that are bashing me, then the white people who are also calling me names. Why don't you condemn Julius?
Yes.
The thing about you black people, you're like, yeah, there's gonna come a time when
Yeah.
and when I become Idi Amin or whatever, everyone's gonna be shocked. Oh, but he was such a good boy. Yes, I used to like his podcast. And it's like, because you guys don't listen, because you're not trying to understand, because you're not trying to work together. When bad things happen, real genocide, real targeted farm murders, Israel and Palestine, like real things, not this bullshit propaganda they keep trying to sell us.
Yeah.
Some of us are going to sit on the sidelines and be like, it's okay. And it's like, but Jan, say something.
Yeah.
And you're like, I've got nothing to say to you. But I gave you a job. Remember, I gave your child a scholarship.
Yeah.
I'm like, while you were spitting on my face.
Yeah.
You gave him a scholarship of my grandfather's blood.
Yeah.
And of my ancestors' land. And I wasn't saying, we're taking the land, we're killing. I wasn't saying that.
Yeah.
I was saying, can we try and work together to move forward? Can we be Afrikaners?
Yeah.
Where you're not just white, you're black. But you guys refuse to listen. So when the next generation comes and they steamroll your incompetent, unintelligent children, I'm gonna keep quiet, or I'm actually even gonna help them to be like, it's because you refuse to listen. It's not by accident that Orom and you spoke about culture evolving.
Yeah.
Culture that is stagnant dies.
It dies.
It has to die.
Absolutely.
It has to die.
And
sorry, that was my last point.
No, it's a good point, and I will tie it in some of the conversations we've had. But on this thing of rented blacks, right? Actually, I don't say that out of demonizing them and all of that, right? So there is money in being a rented black.
100%.
There is definitely money, So. And you can see how some of these people move. Like I think Prince Mashele is making a lot of money saying the type of things that white people want another black person to say.
Is he a rented black?
I think so.
Okay.
And I think how he will monetize that, because what people don't see, the monetization of being a rented black does not play out in public. So you are going to be invited to an offsite by a board of a corporate.
Of course.
And what is the going price of being invited to a strategy session to come and give a political overview?
100%.
There is no set price. So if anyone wants to pay you 20 million, they can pay you 20 million.
100%.
So there is money. So maybe I say it out of envy. This is why I get frustrated by people like Citizen Consent and all of that. And
that lady.
Yeah, I think that's a pro-DA platform.
She's a rented black as well.
I think it serves her. My view is there's a good reason she's doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to draw a distinction between being a rented black and ignorance.
Yeah.
Because those are not the same thing.
Before you draw the parallel, Pumlani Machozi.
Pumla, of course.
Rented black.
Rented black. What is Pumlani Machozi's competence that justifies him sitting on social, whatever, and IRR and all of those things, whatever. But you gotta keep dancing, right? So if you are on the pole, keep dancing.
Justice Malala.
Yeah. So and then sometimes some of these people then want to give some counterbalance to confuse the enemy or whatever. It's interesting how, and I'll come back to the great work you guys do in the media space. But my point is, on the issue of rented and ignorance, you can have a person who means well, but is still wrong.
Sure, because they just got bad information.
They just got bad information. Yeah. So, for example, if we take the whole story, because I've also heard you talking about it, the whole story of the great trek, and clearly, in the story, like we said, people look for Lineage and they are the hero in that story.
100%.
It makes sense why Aaron's Rose will want to tell it as the heroism of the Africans' lineage and history and all of that. But in doing that, you have to be careful in choosing the things that affirm that.
Yes.
Right? One of the crucial things he leaves out, so when does the Great Trek start? It starts in sort of, let's call it
something.
1836.
Yeah.
right? What triggered the Great Trek? Do you know?
Was it not fights with the British in the Cape?
No.
Okay.
Britain ends slavery in 1933. 1833. Then they instruct the colonies to implement the end of slavery.
Okay.
That gets to the Cape Colony as a anti-slavery rule in 1835. That of many things that triggered the Great Trek, the number one reason is the end of slavery in the Cape Colony. Because the farmers of the time felt that there is no way they are going to make their farming productive, profitable, if it does not depend on slavery. So the idea of moving inland was not a culture preservation exploration as it is being positioned. It was because the slaves, the future slaves, were inland. So therefore, let's follow them. Let's get out of the jurisdiction of the Cape Colony to go and perpetuate slavery.
Your understanding of history is that the Great Trek was because that group of people was looking for slaves?
Yes.
Not that they were fighting with the British and looking for land where they wouldn't have to fight the British.
Absolutely. So,
and assert themselves.
Absolutely. The trigger was the end of slavery in the Cape Colony. Up to that point, for example, the Cape Colony was already on English and all of that. So it was, by the way, Afrikaners, no one had to fight for it because, as we said, it was a concoction of various things. No one had strong attachment to the language to say we would like to preserve this, right? It was the end of slavery in 1835 that triggered this. So obviously in Aaron's Root's story, that is not mentioned anywhere. Of course, he's also quite conveniently, he does not get to the point of the Land Act of 1913.
Never mentions it.
Ever mentions it.
So it's one of the things I put in the comments when he said with Jordan Peterson.
Never ever gets there.
When they were like, why would black people feel like they wouldn't be entitled to the land? And he kept quiet. And I'm like, I know him personally. He's a highly intelligent, very well-read
Absolutely.
guy. No, let's not use intelligence in today's context. Highly read, highly knowledgeable person.
Yeah.
And for him to keep quiet there is as good as confirming that there's no valid reason.
Absolutely. But I want to come in his defense and in the defense of the DA, right? So, and perhaps to still ensure that we cover what we needed to cover, I need to tell you.
We're not going to cover it today.
No, we need to. Why we contested elections and all of that. Sure. Citizens as a movement that is really aimed at encouraging professionals to participate in democracy. If there is one outcome, I actually want to make a case why it is important that even if we pursue other things, our own businesses and all of that, we cannot say we are not interested in politics because politics is interested in us. Politics sets the law. It sets the rules for how the game is played.
Correct.
It is the tide that lifts all boats. If it does not function, it actually does not really matter what boat you build on top of it. But participating in politics does not mean we all have to become politicians, right?
Correct.
So I want to talk about, by the way, we registered as a political party and immediately after elections, we deregistered. So today we are not a political party. To start to answer some of your questions around why AfriForum type model and all of that, and why we contested elections to start with. Oh. But yeah, for clarity, today we are not a political party. We are essentially a civil movement that seeks to, and I'll talk about some of the projects that we are pursuing. Okay. But one of my biases, and I guess we all have our biases, is I'm obsessed with the studies of human behavior, right? So especially the evolutionary psychology part of it, right? And so to simplify it, people talk about we are made up of two things. So there's the nature and the nurture, right? So the environment and all of that. Yeah. Let's just call it culture. I mean, so that, because sometimes nature and nurture are so close, it's confusing. So, but usually it's nature, the environment. Sure. Now, why I'm calling it my own blind spot, because when you go around understanding how the hammer works, suddenly you risk that everything looks like a nail. And then, so I must declare that as a blind spot. Sure. The reason I like nature is that it's a way of trying to tell universal traits in things, so
that outlast cultures and times
outlast cultures and all of that. So for example, if I said to you, the person most likely to kill a woman is their partner, the number one predictor of child abuse is actually the involvement of a step-parent in a relationship. If a son is going to kill a father, it is usually in defense of an abused mother. And the killing people is a male sport. Now, if I say these things, they sound South African, but actually they are not South African. They are actually universal traits. A woman will always want a man she can look up to. Yeah. Right? That's not a South African phenomenon. And what evolutionary psychology seeks to do is to say why. So it doesn't mean it's justify something, but it's trying to understand why evolution would have chosen that genetic predisposition. So if you take, for example, the fact that all women across cultures, their relationships work better if they are with a guy they can look up to. By the way, this also includes even the height. So one of the number one predictors of whether your relationship will be stable or not is if you are shorter than your girlfriend, you are already sailing against the wind in terms of evolutionary psychology. I mean, people can go and check this thing, right?
About your short friend again,
I'm thinking, Brian, be careful. You have a friend who's short.
No, I do, but I'm just saying, I mean, it is what. But this thing, so one of the reasons why, so if you go to why women have a genetic predisposition to look for a man with higher social status, evolutionary,
i.e. money.
No, social status I'll come back to that. But social status, money is a strong social status signaling, right?
It's just how people feel about this
There are
person.
other signaling stuff, like humor, for example, why people value humor, a guy with a sense of humor. Humor in evolution is associated with intelligence. You have to be able to imagine something else that other people don't see as obvious and all of that. By the way, they say if you want to make a strong appeal, even if you are unemployed, if you take a picture, include a guitar or some music instrument in the picture, that actually will shoot up your level of attraction. Same guy, right? So because you're saying, I've got dreams, I've got aspirations. So that's why I use social status and not money, right? It's a
could be a combination of many things, but essentially in the society you're in, people see you as a man of value.
Absolutely. So for a long part of history, the prevention pill comes into the world somewhere around the 60s, right? So for much of human history, women were either always pregnant or looking after a small baby. Right? And the lactations or the period of breastfeeding a child could last as long as 4 years. Right? So as a result, women were seldom in a position to go and fend for themselves. Right? Because they were constantly looking after, right? And the only sensible thing in terms of evolution was that you needed a guy who can be able to provide the protection, the food, and all of that. That becomes so, therefore, you start to have a genetic predisposition in picking up a higher status man. The higher status man means he will outdo the other man, he'll be able to collect more, and all of that. Now, they say we are operating with a 200,000 years ago, software as human beings. Unfortunately, these genetic predispositions, we live with them today. This is why when people say, oh no, but that woman is making so much money for herself and all of that, why is still looking for a higher social status? It's a genetic predisposition. You need to fight nature.
They call it hypergamy, I think.
You need to fight nature. So And so there are all of these things that we attach as labels, but actually they've got a very strong natural explanation for that, including also why human beings are not monogamous in terms of nature, right? It gets tricky, even gets to if you want to know species by monogamy or polygamy. It actually also includes the size of the testicles of the males in that species. So, for
size
example,
of the what?
Of the testicles.
The kahunas.
The kahunas.
Okay.
Because, for example, the mountain gorillas.
That's why I keep shifting. That's why I keep shifting. It's not by choice. The ladies must know.
The mountain gorillas have got very tiny testicles because they use size to dominate. So up to a point, then the females then submit, right? Okay. The chimpanzee, on the other hand, is just really one big set of kahunas and all of that, because they are always competing for attention with the females, and human beings fall somewhere in the middle. Sure. I mean, as a species, not by individual.
So small balls, gorilla, big balls, chimp.
Yeah, and then we fall in the middle.
Oh, so that's why much that shines in.
We are not
steroid, gorilla.
The big,
we are not a we're not a monogamous species. And then so actually this is also why when a man in our species chooses to be with one woman, to the man, it is already a big achievement, because I've had to defy nature to choose to be with one person, because nature suggests otherwise.
Yes.
Males were always driven by...
It requires you to fight.
It requires you to fight.
Yeah.
But your partner is like, what do you want to be recognized for? Like, what do you mean?
Sure.
Like, so we have all of these disconnects, and we're like, no, South African men are bastards, whatever. So here is how I would like to pull it together, and why I'm saying in defense of Aaron's roots and DA and all of that. Human beings, to sum it up, are driven by interest.
That's correct.
That's it.
There's nothing more important
than that. Don't worry about moral values, what?
Violence,
interest.
laws,
and
interest.
By the way, not other human beings. All of us. Right? So
every single one
of us. So even when a person seems to argue about how one person is obsessed about self-interest, whatever, if you looked hard enough in the mirror, you will see yourself.
Yes. You're fighting for your self-interest.
You're fighting yourself in that self-interest. So when people say, no, can you imagine what these people are fighting? I can tell you that if you were in that group, you will be doing exactly the same thing. So, many of us now live in security estates, and often we drive past informal settlements, right? And I'm constantly, a lot of estate will have a buffer area, which is usually an industrial area. I'm always paying attention to how stable that buffer area is.
They're moving closer.
They're moving closer. So we are all same. So every time you find a very good moral reason to critique another person, it's generally because you are not in their position.
You're a loser.
So
it's the losers that are always whining.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The winners are normally quiet.
Absolutely. And then when you win, you start to speak the winning language.
100%. And
then you forget about everyone else.
Correct.
Right? So I want to pull this self-interest thread in the conversations we talk about, because I'm also here out of my own self-interest, right? And that self-interest, by evolutionary psychology basis, is my kids, right? Like, and they are very much part of my self-interest. I can see how I made it through eye of a needle with all sorts of challenges, limited exposure, but I want a different future for them, which is really why we started to come back to Citizens. We started Citizens because I was like, there are many of us that are caught in the comfort. This is a manufactured comfort, by the way. So, part of the settlement of the 90s was the compromise for the creation of the middle class in corporate South Africa especially. But it is not because suddenly corporate South Africa required a lot of managers. It was actually we are going to create these roles. And what then happens is these roles often don't come with much of a mandate. Like, you have a whole lot of people that are managers, but when you actually ask them, What authority do you have to make a decision? This thing has been dissected so much. There were a lot of compromises. One of those compromises is the tax rate for businesses was 50% at the time and all of that. So a lot of compromises were made. But we started Citizens because we were saying at some point you need to want to change what's happening. But the self-interest, so things are not yet bad enough for the middle. They are bad, but they are not yet bad enough for the middle market to be able to do something about it. This has actually just become the problem of the poor people. It is not sustainable. At some point, we are going to have to do something. So we got together with a group of like-minded people and say, what are we going to do, right? And we said, let's at least start to have a voice. Now, we said now many of these people are in corporate jobs. They cannot be sharing political views. I am outside corporate, so I can share the views. Because if they share views, they'll be in trouble with their companies.
Of course.
So it makes sense that it is some form of a civil movement of some sort. Why elections? Elections was because when we spoke to people in the know about the media and all of that, they said you're going to struggle to get airtime because there are so many NPOs, NGOs, and until you have sufficient money to be able to buy airtime and all of that. And then the thought then got debated in the group, but this is an election year because this was all happening in 2024.
Sure.
And there's going to be a lot of publicity that comes with elections. Like, how much does it cost to contest elections? We worked it out. And then we'll talk to some of those elements. So therefore we used
Not today.
No, maybe not today, man.
Okay.
So we used
the cost of competing in elections.
Yeah, the cost of competing in elections. So we used elections as a launch pad.
As a marketing strategy.
As a marketing strategy.
Okay.
We'll talk to how much it cost us, but the idea was immediately after that. AfriForum, it was before it started to do some of the things it's doing now. But we like the model of contributions by society. You've covered this a number of times. They generate more than 40 million a month just out of memberships and all of that. And we think the type of organizations that are going to change society are going to be those that are funded by more general public and not just big business elite putting in 15 million, 10 million, and all of that. Sure. So that's really why we started Citizens.
I want to go back. I don't know if you are sidestepping my role, but I want to complete it.
Yeah.
Okay, interests. I'll get to the interest. Prince Mashele, Katleho from Citizen Concerned. Justice Malala is where you decided to sidestep away. Moeletsi Mbeki, Rented Black. You can give short answers.
Yeah, my view is those are people that, and rented, I mean, they realize the incentives of what they are saying elsewhere.
Being a mouthpiece for, let's call it a white.
Yeah, and these are just my opinions,
agenda.
by the
Nothing
way,
wrong.
before people come and sue me. It's just views.
Myself.
Yeah.
Rented Black.
I'm not convinced you are. So I follow quite a lot of your content,
sure.
right? And not just yours, David Mashabela and all
sure.
of that, which is really one of the reasons I said I'm not sidestepping. I wanted to acknowledge the role you guys play. So especially given what has happened in the US. US elections were won by money. Yes, that's the first thing. But more so digital media, social media, alternative media.
Yeah.
And then you can see how that big phenomenon is going to get even here. Yeah. You're starting to see a lot of popping up platforms, Biz News rented platform, mouthpiece of the DA. I mean, that's my view, strong view, right?
Okay.
So
what you rented, you mean they probably get money from the DA or DA affiliated people?
Yeah. Or the agenda is to support a particular narrative that suits the DA. That's what I mean by that.
They might not be getting money.
They might not be getting money.
Okay.
I don't know about, if there's an exchange of money.
Biz News?
Biz News.
Another platform you've been on, State of the Nation.
State of the Nation. It's interesting. And I don't want to compare you to Mike, right?
Sure. Shout out to Mike Shine, man.
I think it's a mix. I like Mike, right? I mean, I've been on that platform, but much of the time before the camera started rolling, we were just fighting, right?
Sure.
Now, for me, there are people, it's the same thing with racism. There are people who are intentionally racist, and then there are people who are not even aware they're racist. They say the most, so they genuinely mean what they say.
Yes.
But actually, they don't see, it's not because they want to be racist, right? So I am a lot more forgiving, for example, to someone like a Mike, because I think sometimes the things he says, he genuinely believes them, right?
Sure.
But actually, that does not mean they are right or they are wrong, right? So, but to come back to you, I think you genuinely want to make a difference.
But 50% rented black.
No, why?
You don't have to be politically correct.
No, I'm not.
I'm trying to get through names.
I'm not a politician.
I when Ushama Miandos.
No.
I'm trying to get through names.
No.
Okay, we'll end with me. Cyril Ramaphosa.
No, we'll come back to Cyril. That's why I'm saying you.
Sizwe Mpofu Walsh.
No, but we'll come back to let's pull together.
I want to come back to interests and what Citizens does. This was just me completing a question.
Ben, let me tell the interesting because it will answer some of these questions.
Sure.
All right. In the theory of, because I want to bring in politics, and then we'll answer some of this.
You're choosing not to.
No, I'll come back to it.
You're choosing not to answer specific names.
I'm going to answer.
You want to give a generic answer.
I'm going to answer.
And then not answer Cyril.
No. I'm going to give a generic, because you need discipline in thinking. Let me give the model, all right?
But you'll answer Cyril.
After giving the model, then I can answer, I can answer the individual. I can answer that. No.
Hit us with a generic model to formulate thinking.
Okay. Cyril is, in my view, is rented by big business. If that settles that, so that it allows me to tell the story,
sir.
Right?
We're here for you.
So the dimensions of the theory of how power works in a modern society is you've got three dominant parties, if you like. You've got business interests, and then you've got the governing, so business elite, the governing elite.
That's members of parliament, the president.
No, the people who are actually in power. You can be a member of parliament, but you're not a governing elite.
Okay.
So EFF might be in national government, but they are not the governing elite.
Okay.
They are not making decisions on where, how money is used in government and all of that, right? Government is for legislation, but the implementation of it sits with the governing elite.
Okay.
Yeah. So you've got the business elite, governing elite, general society.
Okay.
Inside general society, you can have NGOs, and in fact, you can even include the political parties that are not in government, because they are still just organized civil society, if you like.
Who's in the governing elite?
The governing elite are those running government.
Who's that?
Is the president and essentially the cabinet, those in power.
Ministers.
Yeah.
That's the governing elite.
That's the governing
When you speak
elite.
about business, you're speaking the JSE.
No,
and
the
other
business
huge
elite, the big corporates, the wealthy individuals, and all of that. Now, the theory is this, and then you can add, they usually sometimes will add secondary groups, which is foreign interest and organized crime.
Okay.
Right? So those are
organized crime.
That's the one. So when you look at how society plays out, whether we debate China, you need to look at who's funding the system. Right? That's the theory. The theory is, if you understand who's funding the system, then you can almost predict how it plays out.
Okay.
If you go to the history of South Africa, including the negotiations for transition in 1990, at the center of that was big business.
Yes.
That's without a doubt. People like Sampi Tereblanche have covered this thing extensively, including when the ANC people came here, there was really no plan and no resources on how they are going to be integrated. The likes of Anglo then took that gap and ran with it. Shell House was donated to the ANC as an example, right? So big business was that.
Shell House is an investment company.
No, I'm saying the current building, the
headquarters of
the
the
headquarters
ANC.
of the
Lutuli House.
ANC.
Yeah, it's called Shell House.
You're saying the building was...
Yeah, it was donated.
donated.
By big business.
Oh, you're not talking about an investment company that's
No.
Chancellor House.
That's Chancellor House.
Okay, sorry.
So the driver of that transition was big business, right? But if we stick to the primary three parties, what is business elite or capital looking for? Profit, capital accumulation.
Yes.
And the less disruption, the better.
100%.
Right? But to manage society, they need a strong governing elite. So it's called legitimacy in the theory textbook. So the governing elite must have legitimacy.
They must look like...
They must have a moral high ground that
as if they've got everything under control.
The citizens they are looking for prosperity, right? So if you are a politician, the more legitimate you look, the better.
Sure.
The reason why business had to take out the apartheid government is because it was losing legitimacy. That was starting to affect the businesses.
100%.
Then they looked for the new people who will come with legitimacy.
100%.
And the ANC was a good candidate for that.
Best candidate.
And of course, they create the profiles, the Mandela profile and all of that. This is not a critique of any of these individuals. They are all just driven by self-interest. And this is why when people say ANC came with things like BEE, ANC did not come with BEE. Big business came with BEE to appease the governing elite,
sure.
right? So whenever you see chaos in society, so if, for example, you look at South Africa, I call it a perfect crisis. The governing people have lost legitimacy and society is now like prosperity. There's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
There is one party that actually takes, whenever there is chaos between society and the governing, the spoils. Power does not lie idle. Business grabs the power. And even the business grabbing the power, it's not because business is run by bad people. It's actually because they've got the responsibility to look after the businesses and all of that, right? So what you are seeing in South Africa today is that business is getting more and more power. You see a lot of things being centralized into the presidency.
Yes.
But actually what is happening is immediately that goes into some council or forum being run by business people.
That's correct.
Which essentially means we are outsourcing administration of government to unelected people.
Martin Kingston, Adrian Gore. Who else is there? Probably Stephen Sard.
Absolutely.
Some other guys.
So those people did not contest elections to be running government.
Patrice Motsepe, of
very
course.
influential, right? So essentially what we are facing, and it's not unique to South Africa, we are facing a form of oligarchy, which just means, really governing by the few. And then a subset of that is something called plutocracy. So where those few are actually the wealthy and the elite, and they don't have to contest elections, right? And that's where we are sitting now. And business obviously never ever chooses. If you are a radical political person, business does not choose radical people.
Yes.
They don't choose Steve Biko. They don't choose Chris Hani. They don't. Why? Again, not because they are bad people, but because business requires stability, predictability.
They might do bad things, but it's to meet the ends of business, not
Absolutely.
just because they like killing people.
They're like
fun.
all of us.
It's like, this is a problem. You speak about solving problems and intelligence.
Yeah.
Here's a problem, we need to solve it.
Yeah.
Sure.
So they're like all of us. That's what they do. They are not mean people. So what you're seeing now is business is grabbing. You hear that business involved in fixing Transnet. Business is involved in Hold on. This is the space reserved for elected officials.
Correct.
When did we get to a point where that is now handed over to people who were not elected?
Correct.
Right? Now, to come back to some of the questions we were talking about is these parties, all these entities are represented by different people. So there are people who are in the governing elite that are then, because South Africa is funded largely by big business elite,
That's correct.
right?
But you say South Africa or the government?
South African political parties, right? There is very little that comes from individual South Africans contributing to raise the type of
Very
money
little,
that
almost nothing.
AfriForum is raising.
Yeah.
We have to solve that problem. So as citizens, we are not looking for someone to give us 15 million or 30 million. We need to make a compelling case that justifies South Africans giving us $50 a month and all of that, right? That's the hard work we need to do. No one has quite cracked that, but also we are careful we are not a black organization. We are an organization for South Africans. So for us to deal with, let's call it white superiority, you don't need black superiority to replace white superiority, right? So we are careful about what we say. So even on issues like race is just a form of tribalism. If you think about race as tribalism, it will solve a lot of the confusion, right? It is just a tribe with self-interest seeking to perpetuate that. The race as a tribe in South Africa is hiding a very big tribalism issue, right? So, for example, many people who work in government, they know departments that are only run by Tsongas. They know departments that are only run by Zulus. Even in corporate, you can have a person who's just setting up an entirely Zulu, right? But that actually is not detected by the legislation, because the legislation will say those are all black. Right? Correct. But actually it is a problem, right? But it passes all the laws. Yeah. So we have a big bubbling tribal problem that actually race has been good in hiding many of those issues. But at the center of all of this is, what do you define as self-interest? What we need to figure out is, what is that thing that pulls a big tribe together? And we think that tribe can be multiracial and all of that. Do we have views on transformation? Of course, we think transformation has to happen. We think it has to include things like affirmative action and all of that, right? Those are the pains we are going to have to go through. This is what I also hate when people call Singapore, right? There is an entire book, close on 700 pages, from Third World to First World, where Chairman Lee details what they had to do. They had to make tough calls. They had to do things like making English the official language. Business. Yeah, I say South Africans, they want to get to the promised land, to use the Bible analogy. They don't want to go through the wilderness. Of course. We don't want to go through, we want to parachute into that. So we support transformation, but transformation, it has to be a problem whether you've got an entirely white leadership team or you've got an entirely black leadership team. That's equally a bad outcome.
Mandela, you're fighting black domination and white domination.
No, Mandela, no, I don't want to be him.
I want to go a step back to your interests.
Yeah.
You guys are trying to build another AfriForum, to put it simply.
Yeah.
AfriForum represents, they claim minorities.
Yeah.
But in reality, I'd like to state my opinion. It's mostly white Afrikaners.
Yeah.
Right? Who are your people if you are trying to be an AfriForum? Are they South Africans? Are they black?
They are South Africans.
Or maybe the more important question, to make it easy, who are not your people for citizens? Someone listening is like, I'm cut out. They said Chinese, American, not for. Who are you guys trying to attract?
Who are we not? So I can talk to who we are trying to attract. Who are we not is anything else that is based on the traditional. So, for example, you will hear that MK is a tribal party, whatever. Freedom Front is a tribal party. Right? It's never referred to as a tribal party, but it's actually a tribal party.
Of course.
So we cannot get away again, in the spirit of evolutionary psychology, human beings cannot resist tribes.
Yes.
To think you are actually going to be outside a tribe is actually crazy. Sure. Whether that tribe, you call it like-minded people, intelligent people, or whatever, right? For us, we started by saying, in the communist socialist language is called the vanguard. So who are the people who have enough exposure to shape the discussion in the country?
Okay.
Because in South Africa, we have, so you have one person who's actually looking after a big family, and that family, usually the middle class, that family does not have the necessary exposure and all of that, whatever. But that person is highly influential on that family.
Yeah.
Right? So if this person said, we are supporting this cause, they come with the credibility in that family for that. So yes, those families may not be our direct first of line primary target, but actually we are also for them, but through essentially the vanguard, the informed.
In simple English, educated.
Educated.
At tertiary level?
Employed.
Tertiary level.
More like tertiary level, ideally, right?
Okay.
Because that education gives you exposure, or it helps you also understand the different views and all of that.
Okay. As a job?
As a job.
No minimum earning?
No minimum earning, but our primary target is more the middle income. And the reason why I'm more the middle income, the low income, and if you go to the whole theory of Maslow's hierarchy, this is one of the things I like that drives me, like grind my balls, like whenever people say, why are this, and you touched on it in one of your talks where people were like, why are South Africans still voting for the ANC or whatever? Maslow tried to argue that actually, depending on where your level, where you are, what issues are you dealing with, there are certain things that mean nothing to you.
100%.
You know, so if I'm fighting the bread and butter issues, what am I going to eat tonight? You can come with all your philosophical view about how things should work or not work. And this is not a black problem. This is why I hate every time people say, this black people and this, and I'm giving up on them and all of that. I'm like, if you go through Hillbrow, you are likely to come across a white hobo in the middle of Hillbrow at midnight, at the time when many white people will say they will never set foot in Hillbrow during the day. Why? Because that homeless hobo person is dealing the lowest level needs of his life. So we are all same. You know, it's partly why the apartheid government and before that the Union of South Africa never wanted to have poor white people, because those people were going to undermine what they wanted to promote as a dominant superiority idea. Yeah. Poor people will embarrass you but it's not because they are bad people. It's actually really because in their everyday life, they are dealing with everyday survival issues, ideological issues, self-actualization. What does South Africa, right? They just don't care. So that's why we are not going to them directly, because one of the things, you know, another thing with AfriForum is in local communities and all of that. We don't want to do that, right? We think there are systemic issues that actually, if they were solved, actually they improve things for everyone. So to give you an example, in my village in Semaning, Hamatlala in Limpopo, I can get there and they say, we don't have water. Now, interestingly, my village will almost always vote ANC because pre-94, just security of water supply was an issue. You had to know where to go dig and hopefully you find something and all of that. In my village, water runs once a week. But it's a miracle in that village because they've gone from uncertainty of water supply to, we know predictably, once a week on a Thursday we're going to have running water. Now,
and that's thanks to the ANC.
Yeah, that's thanks to the ANC, and they will always be absolutely. Now, a person who's used to water running every day from a tap will look at water once a week and like, are you guys insane? Yeah. But it is a reference point that does not exist in that community. Yeah. You're talking about a foreign concept. They will even wonder if that is even possible, because they used to wonder where they will get water. But I call that a local issue.
Sure.
There is enough people trying to tackle the local issue. A systemic issue.
You believe so?
No, I'm saying there are people playing there. Maybe not enough. Maybe it's not enough.
Okay.
What would be a systemic issue? A systemic issue is, why are we not talking about desalination of seawater when we are surrounded by seawater on both sides of the country? Now, I cannot go and pitch that with my people in my village, because I will say to them, do you know that part of what we need to do here is to get water from Durban? And they'll be like, yeah, when I get, well, Jan, you go study something. Now, whatever.
Sure.
So there's not enough discussions happening on systemic issues. We keep, there's a guy called Juvenal, who was a Roman poet, who talked about bread and circuses. And what he was saying is, once the emperors took over Rome, they realized if you can give people free food, keep them occupied, entertain them. That's how the likes of Colosseum, today it's an attractive tourist, whatever. Yeah. Colosseum was built to keep Rome entertained. Correct. So that it distracts people from what is actually going on. Sure. And that's exactly where we are now. We are being made to discuss silly things like, VAT is like a 0.05% of the budget of South Africa. How did it become the main topic, right? Who actually says this is what we should be discussing? On the systemic issues, I don't know if you know this, that somewhere around 2022, pension funds in South Africa, the law was changed to allow them to invest as much as 45% of the pension funds outside South Africa, right? That money is being used to fund development in other countries. Yeah. We're not having that conversation. You will remember there was some factor thing where money was taken from foreign currency profits and 250 billion went to treasury. But actually it was 350 billion, 100 went to the Reserve Bank. So this why but these things just never make the news. They just keep entertaining us, right?
Educated, hopefully at tertiary level.
Yeah.
So you don't want poor people. You said employed, but it's not employed. It's a certain income level that you're looking for. You said middle income. How much is that?
No, so I'm looking for, the segmentation will probably be more psychographic than income, right? So, but it's difficult to define psychographic. Psychographic is a person sufficiently informed to be able to form a useful view that is just not narrowed down by their immediate circumstances. But it's very difficult to say what will be the proxy, because once you've defined that, you need proxy. We don't have enough informed people participating in the conversation.
Yeah, the people that you're looking for.
Yes.
How much must they be earning as a minimum is what I'm asking.
So if you earn anything more than, let's say, 30K,
30.
I think you've got much of your basics covered.
This is after tax?
No, like gross, right?
Hey, Debs, so we're out. I was about to sign out to Citizens. So 30K cross. No. Hey, I get this is the amount of... Because I'm educated.
But
you're educated?
But
hey, when are you not educated?
Yes, I don't know.
Hey, when you are out a long
He's
time ago.
socially educated.
30,000. It's a catch. Okay, sorry, 30,000.
But that's what I'm saying is if you use income as proxy.
No, so there's a reason I asked this, right?
Yeah.
So I started with AfriForum as a base.
Yeah.
And I'm going to criticize you when we're done going through this exercise. I think we've got 10 minutes left.
You have 10 minutes. Can I use most of that 10 minutes, not you?
No, that's okay. But I'm trying to help you because my little experience with South Africans is they like things that are a bit more clear.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make the mistake of referring you to the Purple Group, the Ravonia guys that ended up building Rise Mzansi, Black Business Council Outer, because maybe there's a specific different segment you're looking for or different agenda. So people will listen and be like, oh, but these guys do that.
Yes.
Those guys. So I wanted to figure out what your differentiator is.
Yes.
Of which one of them is that you don't like local. And that was going to be my one big criticism. The one thing that keeps the ANC strong, the one thing that the EFF and the MK understand, the thing that you said you don't support, which is actually the reason AfriForum is so strong, but people are not aware.
Yes.
It's that they call it grassroots.
Yes.
And you're saying we don't want that. And it's like, yo, do you wanna go join Rise Mzansi and contest in parliament to shift policy so that you can desalinate? Because at the ground, people want to hear, I give these guys $50 because they brought in more pipes. Or they brought in a majojo.
Yes.
You know, we now have a project that's desalinating water from Durban. Kwani track a figure twice a week.
Yes.
But you're saying you're not that. So I was just trying to get to the crux of who you're attracting, because it's going to be easier for myself and the people you're attracting to come close and be like, hey, Chief, take it down to 10K.
Yeah.
Hey, Chief, make it matric.
Yeah.
Make it someone who's voted before. Or someone who's volunteered somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be easier to then grow to citizens
I think
from there.
maybe
But from here, you can hit.
Yeah, let's touch on that, Pen. So I'm not saying I don't care about the locals, right?
Sure.
I'm saying I don't think we can make a difference in that space. There are other people who can make a difference. But I think there's a space that, what I'm saying is there is a space of systemic issues that we feel there is not enough people tackling those issues.
Sounds like a lobby group to government.
A lobby group
To government.
To government. There is enough issues. So, for example, one of the things we want to tackle is this idea of parents being excluded on NSFAS on the basis of their income. We actually think it might be unconstitutional, because South Africa uses a progressive tax system, i.e., if you earn more, you're going to pay more and all of that. So you have already paid more. It can't be that your earning is still being used as a basis of excluding you.
Yeah.
So that needs to be
The
challenged.
money you've paid, you can't get to enjoy when you need it.
Yes.
Not that when you want it, when
But
you need
the
it.
fact that you earn more, that is already accounted for in the tax system. So as a result, you end up, that's why we argue that a lot of middle market pay as much as 80% in taxes. Because after you've been taxed,
Yes.
you still have to pay for the education that should come from your taxes.
Which is tax.
Security, transport, and all of that. So
Medical aid. That's all additional tax.
All of those are taxes, right?
In a country where these things are free.
Oh, in a
as far
country
as we
where,
know.
and you've already been penalized for earning more.
Because you pay for other people's free
You can't
things,
be excluded.
but you can't get.
Again,
Yeah.
no one is challenging those things, right? Now, those things, of course, they will not have relevance. Like I say, if I went to my village, right, it will fly over. I'm not saying they are not important. I'm not saying I don't care about them. I just feel like there are certain systemic issues that if we do not deal, it does not really matter what you do at a local level. South Africa is a dry country. Let's start there, right? You can go and fight the water issues at a local community, but until someone grapples with how do we deal with the fact that South Africa has limited water to start with, it actually may make insignificant the issues you're discussing at a local level. So, and by the way, you asked me questions where I did not give clear answers on identity, ideology, and all of that. Yeah. And that's also it's also factual. Like it reflects where we are. I don't think we've got all the answers. There's a lot of things that we are grappling with. We're grappling with what does it mean. Now, again, last theory. I'm going to give you last theory. The theory is if you're going to motivate people, this is also what the CIA does to recruit agents. They use a model called MICE. MICE. So in MICE, M stands for money. Money is a strong motivator. I is for ideology. So if you can sell a concept like Penuelism,
that's what's up.
That's what's
so
let's get in there. Strong motivation, right? Yeah. And then C is for coercion. So either blackmail people, like for example, if you don't vote for the ANC, you're gonna lose your grant and all of that. That's coercion. Yeah. And then the E is for ego. You can appeal to a person's ego to say, it is people like you, Pen, that I am looking for, and all of that, and whatever, right? Yeah. You are important. Or this is where things like culture that we are talking about also plays a role. It's a Zulu thing.
Of course, you wouldn't understand.
Thing. Yeah. Or it's a black thing, or whatever, right? That appeals to some sort of made up, ego somewhere else. Now, parties use a combination of these things. Like in the future conversation, when we talk about elections and how they played out, We got about 7,000 votes. We've got about 15,000 people who registered
This
on
is you
our
guys.
website. Yeah.
Congrats, by the way.
And
7,000 if you were to put them in a hole, Baba.
absolutely. So,
As
so
a
we
newcomer.
learned quite a lot
Congrats.
from the makeup
You
of
shouldn't
it.
have left, by the way.
You know,
But that's just my criticism.
And what is also said, and this is not competition of losers, right?
Yeah.
We did better than Shiluva of Bongani Baloyi.
Yeah.
And why I'm saying that's a sad thing, because if you were doing a theoretical exercise, you will say, here is a guy who comes with political credentials.
He was an amazing
He was
mayor
a
for the
mayor
DA.
and
Yeah.
all of that. We did not expect to do better than Shiluva. We did not. Like
Bogan has
based
joined MK now.
join MK, right? So we have learned so much. But one of the things we need to refine, so money is a big problem in that mice thing.
Yeah.
You need to be careful where you get it. We don't want the big business elite money. We want to find a model that appeals to Pen and Sizwe and Debza to say, okay, I hear you guys, it will take a long time.
Sure.
Ideology is a big thing. Now, ideology is slightly more complex because there's track 1 and track 2. Track 1 is what a party can say about themselves, right?
Sure.
And then there is the things that they really do. Like for example, you will never find DA saying that they're a white party, right? But they actually are a white party if, for example, you use their leadership makeup as a proxy,
Sure.
right? They will come and say, yeah, we've got 25% black people there. But if you use that logic, ShopRite is a black company.
Of course.
Or Capitec is a black
By
bank,
far.
by far, right? It's crazy.
95% black.
But you have to look at the leadership of all of that. So you have parties that have got the public stance and then the real thing. A lot of parties in South Africa, there's a big disconnect between what they say. In fact, one of the parties that has got the shortest gap between what they say and what they do is actually Patriotic Alliance, interestingly. So if you were looking for a credible party in terms of alignment between what they say and what they do,
You reckon it's about Gaten?
Bogaten are clear. I mean, they're saying we are here for the money. They say we are here for the money. Or we
so
are
they're
here for
not
power.
lying.
And they're like, there might be some lies, but I'm saying if you rank them.
Closer to the truth.
Right, so there's the ideology. We still have to figure out the ideology. By the strong ideology now among white voters is fear. Fear is, by evolutionary psychology, is the strongest of feelings. Right? The others, so the Reich of Us, you mentioned Rice Mzan's action essay. Part of our problem is we are selling hope. We are selling a better whatever. You cannot compete with fear.
You can't compete with fear.
Fear is a very primal, instinct and emotion. So DA rides on fear. AfriForum rides on fear. The pioneer movement of Ernst Ruessen. So there is a big fear market out there. Now, we have not been able to find an appealing fear story. So we have been selling hope.
Sure.
Hope is very difficult to sell. Very, very difficult.
Unless if you're
to
opening
sell.
a church.
Unless if you're opening,
if you're opening a church, Baba.
sell. Very, very difficult to sell. And then we can't use coercion. We don't have the power to blackmail anyone. Ego is not. We have not quite figured out. So there's a lot of things we have not quite.
A little bit
figured
now. I mean, if you for example start speaking about income, and I say no, I'm a part of Citizens. That means the honeys will know. Hey, I think this guy's got money.
I was about to say that the difference between you what you're saying is correct. You're still finding the answers.
Yeah.
But what AfriForum has over you guys, let's even take out the money from the mice incident, is the ideology. They have that.
Absolutely.
So
who is your enemy? Because it's important to
You
know.
need the enemy.
who
You need
are
the villain.
Who are you not, and who are the people that are attacking
Absolutely.
you? So the people are like, hey,
Absolutely.
yes, you're right. There's the problem.
Absolutely.
Let me join these guys.
because
Because fighting.
even with the middle class that you speak of, that you're saying
Yeah.
the people you're targeting,
Yeah.
you'd also face an issue of ideology.
No.
Because they are so scattered amongst themselves that they have no
Absolutely.
primary
Absolutely.
way of thinking.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah.
Listen, if we had the answers, we would be running the government. Like, we don't have the answers, right? The parties that did well are the parties that were strong, either have a strong foundation or strong ideology.
Or strong money.
Like, for example, I think people laughed when Gaten did Abahambe and all of that. That thing mentally, it's a strong signal. Like, people will
this
always
day.
remember it.
To this day.
Right?
Yeah.
And because he's seen as the face, that's the theory of positioning. They'll see him as the face of the anti-immigrants
Correct.
thing, right? And you
More
need
than Abu Herman Mashaba.
more than Abu Herman
crazy.
Mashaba. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you need to grab a position. We need to figure out what that position is. We can have subsequent conversations. Where I would like to close this, Pen, is I want, especially Black South Africans, to stop the amount of self-hate that is coming on. So if you see something and you call it black, if you dig a little bit deeper, you will find that, so for example, the filth in Joburg is because black people live there. Indians are very entrepreneurial and all of that. Like, if you want to see the amount of filth in a city, you must go to many of the cities in India, right? Mm-hmm. You have not seen the amount of filth. You've not seen filth, right? Mm-hmm. So we repeat these things because someone gives us, this is what you need to say, and we keep on repeating them, right? Mm-hmm. New York, if you go in the middle of Manhattan and you walk around at 2 a.m., you will see that what saves Manhattan from being a filth pit is service delivery. The amount of cleaning and street scrubbing that happens at 2 a.m. is actually why that thing is not a rat-infested whatever.
Because New York has got gang rats.
Gang rats. Gang rats. So I want us to be careful.
And Paris and New York.
And sometimes people say
popular for their rats.
Absolutely. Sometimes people say things out of ignorance. So for example, the other day Khwezi was saying South Africa has got a black male problem.
I was so hurt when he said that. I was so hurt when he said that.
I was like, do you even understand what you just said? Like, because
yeah, it was a mistake. We're a huge fan of Uchendran Khwezi.
We are a big fan, but you can't make statements like that. I mean, I can. So if you searched, interesting, you must do the steps. We are almost done. If you use prisoner population as a proxy, and you search you say South African prisoner population in South Africa by race, you will see a very interesting makeup. Of course, black people will be like in the 70s and all of that, but that's naturally because this is a black society, right? If you do the same thing and you say prisoner population in UK by race, of course, there's no surprise that 79% of those are white, right? That's not because UK has got a white problem.
I'm surprised. I would have thought it would actually be majority black.
No, it's not.
In America, I think it's majority black, and black people are a minority there. I'm only saying this to try and help your argument.
By the way, it's not a majority black. This is the point I want to make.
What's not a majority black?
Even in US. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you. So when they say majority black, they look for patterns of overrepresentation. What does overrepresentation mean? Overrepresentation means, let's say you make 15% of the population, but you are 30% of prisoners.
Sure.
They will say you are the crime is dominant in that area because you are overrepresented in the numbers than your natural proportion. Well, this is what's scary. If you apply that same logic, you can argue that South Africa has got a white crime problem.
Because they're overrepresented in the prison.
Because if you search for prisoner population by race in South Africa, whites make up 20% of the prisoner population, when whites as a population are only 7% of South Africa. I'm saying if you wanted to make that argument, you have data that can do that. But to sum up what Citizens stands for, I'm not here to say, as I say, I don't want superiority of one race to be replaced by other. We are at pains trying to craft. So I'm not here to be anti-white. I'm pro-South Africans, and we need to find a new tribe that starts to reflect the middle of South Africa. has to go through the wilderness and the tough calls that have to be made, including on things like quotas and transformation, which must happen. Rasi has told us how he has done it.
Sure.
People just like, we want to celebrate the success of what he has done. He has written a book, a manual saying, this is how I did it, right? I took transformation serious. So I feel like as South Africans, one day we will have to grapple with this.
Yeah.
If people go on our website, citizens.org, citizens with a Z-A, citizens.org, we've got a document there. It's not too long. It's about maybe 7 pages or whatever. We have articulated the things that we see as the priorities, the 7 priorities that if South Africa does not deal with by 2035, we really will deal with the real collapse of the system. We have to start to pursue some of the initiatives. People will see us out there challenging NSFAS rules. NSFAS today is for Technikon and university. Today, people want to study data analysis, data-driven, whatever. Do you know all of these things, AI, all of these short courses are excluded from funding by NSFAS,
Hectic.
which is insane. It's like absolutely insane. So we'll start to be more visible. This requires funding. We are not looking for anyone to come and give us like 10 million or whatever.
But we'll still take it.
No, I don't think we will.
Depending on who it is.
I don't think we will. So the idea,
Your lobby group, I'll tell you what the Afri Forum leaders told me when Aaron's Roots was still there, which is very important. They said the difference between us and other groups is we have a strict mandate that we follow. Anyone who believes in our mandate can fund us and we work. If you come in here, we don't care if you give us money, no money. If you have ideas that are against our mandate, we're not interested.
Absolutely.
So you can bring 10 million, as long as you're not bringing 10 million to say, but stop fighting NSFAS. It's like, no, we don't want your money because our mandate is clear.
Absolutely. But for us, until, and you're right, it might actually be silly to not take them. We will not take it. And you said this about when we were talking about local and grassroots, right? You are right. But I'm old enough to have been around when anyone who started a digital platform would have sounded crazy, especially in banking, when the branch were the thing.
100%.
You know, when I did work, you also did work in credit. When we tried to do scored credit to say decisions in the future will be made by machines. At the time when decisions were being made by the branch manager based on the shoes you're wearing and credibility in society and all of that, it sounded crazy. I know what we are saying sounds crazy against the current politics. But what I'm saying is we see a future where information, attention, digital, social media will over time play such a big role in influencing what happens in society that will over time make the local issues less impactful on outcomes, not less important, less impactful on political outcomes. And this is why I was using US as an example to say what we are seeing there is money and media, new media, actually will be influential. Yes, today we will sound silly by not having a branch at some local community. That's fine. This is why for us, this is not a 12 months project. It's a multi-year project that we actually will want to hand it over to a new generation of kids that are today, you know, one of the best way to hate a person is to know very little about them. But I think racism is going to be more and more difficult with kids that are playing rugby together, studying together, living together, and all of that. And as that population grows, that population is going to have very different ideologies. And yes, we might not see the results of this in my generation, but I don't want the next generation to start from scratch. I want them to say, here is a platform that we can take, run with. Yes, it will tackle the difficult racial legacy issues and all of that, but the purpose is to build a very different South Africa that works for everyone in South Africa. I don't want white people to go. I don't want Indian people to go. I don't think they are bad people. I think they are looking after their self-interest.
Sounds like a lobby group. I want to make a point because this is very important to me and I don't want to shut down this episode until we do. General Mkhwanazi's mistake, this is very personal to me, is the same mistake that people will make when they speak about black men abandoning their children.
Yeah.
Or just black people being criminals.
Yeah.
Depending on, you are very right, the different criteria you use by racial group, by whatever, they almost never want to highlight the real core. Because if you're going to say the argument is black men, we need to ask why the overwhelming majority of black men are not in prison.
Yeah.
Because now when you say we've got a black male problem, okay, then why am I not in prison? I'm a black man. What are you saying?
Yeah.
The issue is it's not a black man. Similarly, white people are overrepresented, but it's not a white people problem.
Yes.
You have to ask, what are the crimes they're committing?
Absolutely.
A lot of them have to do with poverty.
Yes.
Poor people in the UK, in Jobu quote, you're like,
Yeah.
it's poor people. Oh,
Yeah.
we thought it was white people then,
Yeah.
black. No,
Yeah.
it's poor people or angry people or people that are frustrated by whatever the case. And when you're going to be a guy at that level like Mkhwanazi, who's meant to report on these things
Yeah.
so we can find the problems and solve them.
Yeah.
And you're going to say the issue is a Zulu problem.
Yeah.
And we're like, but why are all the other Zulus not doing this?
No, absolutely.
We're never going to solve
Absolutely. Yeah.
that problem. And I think with the work Citizens is doing, with the lobby work you guys want to do,
Yeah.
a big part of the work your movement is going to have to get right
Yeah.
is going to be in defining
Yeah.
the problems.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't, whatever solutions you
Absolutely.
pretend you're coming up with are never
Yes.
going to work and you're going to be scratching your heads.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm saying, like, I was once younger and I wanted to be right a lot of times, but I'm not there yet. I've got gray hair, I'm older. I love the different perspectives. And I also know things that we have not yet quite solved for, but we have to continue to work. In the meantime, I could have waited until we've got all the answers. I'm shocked by the amount of things that are said in ignorance and are being said by black people, that I'm like, no, but actually you are just ignorant. Like, so, one of the most famous things is it will take another black person to bring you down, right? It's like, the Pope is Catholic. You've not said anything. You said you are going to be disappointed by the people you interact with and are surrounded with more regularly. If the makeup of the people you deal with are surrounded by and all of that are black, it follows that the people who are going to disappoint you will be black.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I can tell you that in another country, in Spain or in Poland, they probably have got something similar. Yeah. It will take another Polish to bring it down. Stop saying these silly things. Human beings are the same, driven by self-interest. And if someone is going to disappoint you, even the thing about the person most likely to kill a woman is their partner, actually it's not a black thing, it's not a South African thing, is if there is one person two people who interact the most together are usually partners. If
with high emotions.
High emotions. If there are going to be differences with emotionally charged differences that might lead to things like homicide, it's going to be those people. Yeah. To come out and say like black people are killing their partners and whatever, it's madness. So I want these things to stop. Yeah, we may not have solved what Citizens stands for, but I'm saying when you find yourself saying, black people are a problem or this or whatever, read a little bit. Just read a little bit. Habib says we say Indians are entrepreneurial. He said he does not know where that comes from. Because what happens is like Indians who came here as indentured labor, right? Slave. When the Union of South Africa was formed, and a lot of, because while people were a small group, they were more interested in big businesses. The question was, who's going to be running the small shops in the communities or in the towns? Because a lot of white people were not interested in those type of businesses. People who came here as indentured labor, which literally means you were a slave for a period of time, I think it was up to 10 years, and you earn your freedom. And then those people then got the opportunity to run the small shops in the area. Now you are dealing with the 6th and 7th generation of that. Now it almost sounds wise to say they have the entrepreneurial gene.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm saying, okay, if you come to that conclusion, there is easy way to test it. Go to an area that has got the highest number of Indians and test if that's actually the case. Now we say, Pakistanis work together. These people work together. If Pakistanis work so well together, Pakistan will be top of the list on GDP and all of that, right? So be careful on very superficial, simplistic conclusions you make. Immigrants are a favorite topic. I can tell you, my background is IT. My friends are in the UK, right? They work well together. They are seen as the most hardworking people. So if you go there, they'll say, South Africans, those people work so hard and all of that. And this is a true phenomenon across the world. When it comes to immigrants, you always attract the best and the worst. Why? You attract the best because the official rules will say you need to bring a scarce skill when you come to a country. Who are you going to attract through those legal channels? You're going to attract the engineers, the scientists, and all of that.
Yeah.
In that process, you're creating a stereotype that universities are being run by the foreigners, and then it quickly becomes they are more intelligent. No, the ordinary people are still in the country.
Yeah.
You also attract the worst because the people who are going to find an illegal way of coming into a country are the criminals, like those who don't observe the rule of law.
Yes.
So everywhere you go, when you talk about immigrants, you are going to have these two groups. There is nothing that brings us the ordinary people legally. Then we form views. Oh no, these people work so hard. South Africans are lazy and all of that. And when you are an immigrant, it's easy to come together. Why? Survival.
Sure.
Fear. You feel outnumbered. One of the problems we have, the reason why we don't work as well as we do, there is no driver that forces us. We don't face possible extinction and being killed by another race, whatever. We're gonna have to find other reasons of achieving that. So I want us to just stop this nonsense about there's nothing wrong with the black people in South Africa. We need exposure. We need people to read more and all of that. And parallel to that, we need to figure out how to build the type of South Africa that we will want to bequeath and hand over to our children, right? And that South Africa requires a lot of compromises outside of our immediate self-interest.
Thank you so much, Jan.